learn the syntax of padding. First of all, let's make a few changes to the HTML documents we're working with. Let's get rid of the span element. I keep only divs and paragraphs for now. Also, let's change the height of all the divs to auto so that we can see the impacts of padding clearly. Okay, now let's define some padding to the Facebook div. So the syntax is padding. There are several ways of defining the padding. The first one is by using one value. So if we set that value to 16 pixels, for instance, it's going to define the padding from all the div sites. And if we go to inspect elements, we will see clearly what's going on. So if we select the Facebook div, we can see that the contents is here and the padding is set to 16 from all sides. But you will notice that there is some space between the text and the paragraph top and bottom borders. And if you remember what we have said in the previous video, we say that paragraphs, they have some default margins. And that's why we see that space. So let's get rid of that space for now and see what's going to happen. So let's go back to the live preview and let's define a margin to paragraphs of 0. So we're going to jump a little bit further here because we haven't seen the syntax of margins, but we're going to come back to margins later. Okay, let's set that to 0. And now you can see, if you go to inspect elements, that the space between the Facebook text and the border of the paragraph has disappeared. Okay. All right. Let's go back to the brackets file, go back to live preview and set some padding now to the next div, which is the Apple div. So syntax is padding. Now we're going to use 4 values. So we're going to define a padding for each of the 4 sides of the div. Basically, it's going to start with the top side, moving to the right one, then the bottom one, and then the left one. Okay. So the first one for the top, followed by right, followed by the bottom one, and then followed by the left one. Okay. And also there is another way. It's by using only 2 values, which are going to define the padding for the top and bottom sides. And then the second one is going to define the padding for the right and left sides. Okay. So for instance, let's set that to 40 pixels and 10 pixels. Okay. If we go to inspect elements and just see what's going on, if we go to the Microsoft div, we can see padding at the top and bottom of 40, and from the left and right sides, it's set to 10 pixels. Also, regarding the dimensions of the div, after we add padding, the div is going to have new dimensions. So the new dimensions are going to be the original dimensions of the div, which we can see here as the dimensions of the content, plus the padding. Okay, so the height, for instance, is going to be, for Microsoft's div, is going to be 40 pixels plus 40 pixels plus the height of the content. And also for the width is going to be 10 pixels plus 312 pixels plus 10 pixels of the padding. All right. So this is it for padding. In the next video, we're going to cover the borders. We're going to learn the box model. All right. So let's go to our project folder and go to CSS, and let's open the previous file directly without using brackets. Okay. So we're going to open it here. Okay. Let's click right and go to inspect element. All right. So let's select the yellow box for Apple. Okay. What we are seeing here represents the box model. The blue part is showing the content of the div. And then following the content, we've got a padding, which is defining the distance between the content and the border. And then we've got the border, which we cannot see on the page because we haven't set it. We haven't set any width for the border. And also following the border, we've got a margin which separates the HTML element from elements around it. Okay, so this is the box model. All HTML elements, they follow the box model. Okay, so this box model is for the Apple div. Okay, if we open the div and we select the paragraph, now it's going to be different. So the content is this from here to here. So you can see no padding, no border, but there is a margin, and we can see here that the margin is 16 pixels in terms of width. So the margin for paragraphs is set by default. Okay, so this margin is set by default to 16 pixels. Okay, so this is it regarding the box model. In the next few videos, we're gonna learn how to set the different parts of the box model. We're gonna start with the padding, and then we're gonna go to the border, and also there is an element that is not part of the dimensions of the HTML element, which is called the outline, which is just outside the border. It sets some decoration to the border just outside, and we can't see it. It comes just before the margin, but it does not affect the dimensions of the HTML element. Okay, so in the next video, we're going to start with the syntax of padding. We're going to learn how to set borders for HTML elements. We're going to start with the Facebook div, but before we do that, we're going to define a background color for paragraphs so that we can see how everything is laid out. So let's choose a color, a background color for paragraphs, and by using Ctrl-Alt-K, we can use our color picker, and let's go for this color, for instance. Okay, now we can see everything. We can see the contents of the div, and we can see the padding, and now we're going to be defining the border. Okay, so if we start with the Facebook div, basically there are several ways of defining borders. The first one is by using one line where we define everything, both the width, the style, and the color if we want to. So the syntax is border, and now we're going to define the width using one value. Okay, and then we can define the style, so we're going to use a ridge style. And now you can see that the border is already set. We haven't used any color, but by default this gray color is the one that's used. And usually if you want to choose a color, it's going to be the second parameter that we need to put after the width. And let's pick up a certain color for our border. Let's go for something like this. And now you can see the border with the chosen color. Okay, so that's one way of defining the parameters of borders. Now if you move to the Apple div, so we're going to use another way. First of all, we're going to define the border width using 4 values, and that's if we want to set one different value for each side. So the syntax is border width, and we are going to choose different values for each side. So we're starting with the top side, followed by the right one, then the left one, sorry, the bottom one, and then the bottom one, and then the left one. Okay, so we don't see anything yet because we haven't defined any style. Now if we define the border color, we can do exactly the same. So border color, and we can use a different color for each side. So let's go black, green, orange, yellow. So you can see that we don't see anything yet so far because we haven't defined any style yet. So once we define the style using border style, then we're going to see the border. So let's go for ridge again, and now you can see the border. Okay, and you can see the different colors for and different widths for each side. Okay, now let's move to the Microsoft div, and now we're gonna define the border width using only 2 values, and in this case The first value is going to define the border for the top and bottom sides, and then the second one is going to define the value for the right and left side. Okay, let's use a border style, and this time let's go for a groove style. Okay, and let's choose a color. Okay, let's go for, okay, let's pick up a color from here. All right, there is another parameter that we can use, is it's the border radius, and basically the border radius will make the corners curved basically. So if we set it to 10 pixels for instance, so you can see now that the borders are curved, and the bigger the radius is, the more curved the corners are going to be. So if we set that to 20 pixels, 30 pixels, 40, it will change accordingly. Now if we set the height and the width to 100 pixels for instance, and we increase the border radius, let's go to 80 pixels, and also if we change the padding and we set it to 10 pixels for all sides, now we start getting a circle. Okay, and if we want the border radius to be, or border width to be the same for all sides, then we can have a more uniform circle. All right, so this is one way of changing a div to a circle. This is it for borders. In the next video, you're going to move to the outlines.